That was actually a surprise for me. So I was in Eastbourne.
There is a hair tie sitting somewhere inside a Nike storage facility in Beaverton, Oregon, that was never meant to be sold. It is small. It is woven. It carries the shape of a sampaguita, the national flower of the Philippines, the flower Filipino grandmothers thread into their granddaughters' hair before church, before weddings, before the moments that matter. Nike's design team made it for exactly one athlete on the planet. Not a prototype, not a limited release. One, that hair tie is the cheapest object in this entire story, and it is also the most expensive signal Nike has sent about Alex Eala. Because brands like Nike do not commission one-of-one cultural artifacts for athletes they are casually sponsoring. They commission them for athletes they are quietly building an empire around. So here is the question the entire tennis industry is whispering about right now, in the back rooms of agencies in London and the analyst desks in New York, and the group chats of sports marketers in Manila. What is the real number Nike is preparing to put behind Alex Eala? Nobody outside a very small room knows the answer yet. But the comparable deals, the ones we can see, the ones that have already been signed by players in Eala's exact commercial position, tell a story so specific that by the end of this video, you are going to have a number in your head, and it is going to be larger than you expect. Let's walk through what the math actually suggests. Before we touch a single dollar figure, you need to understand why this conversation even exists. Because on paper, on the cold, ranking-driven, results-only paper that the WTA publishes every Monday morning, Alex Eala should not yet be having a Nike conversation of this magnitude. She has not won a WTA main tour title. Her career-high ranking sits in the 30s. She has lost in the first round of her last 2 Grand Slams. By the traditional metric that has governed tennis endorsements for 40 years, ranking plus slam results equals commercial value, Eala is a mid-tier prospect, promising, worth a developmental deal, not worth an empire. And yet, Gigi Salmon, the lead tennis presenter at Sky Sports, stood at an industry event in London and said the quiet part out loud. She said that in terms of appeal, in terms of the crowds that follow her, Eala might already be the biggest star. She described a Dubai tournament earlier in 2026, where Eala was ranked outside the top 40, as feeling like a Taylor Swift concert. Her exact phrase, "People were screaming," at a WTA event, for a player not yet in the top 30. That is not a normal sentence in tennis broadcasting. Sky Sports presenters do not casually invoke Taylor Swift when describing player draw. They describe player draw with words like strong following or growing fan base. When Salmon reached for Taylor Swift, she was telling the industry something the rankings could not. That the commercial gravity around this player has already detached from her on-court resume. Kim Clijsters went further. 4-time Grand Slam champion, 2-time world number 1, Belgian, no nationalistic stake, no agenda, sat on Andy Roddick's podcast and said Eala has to deal with the life of being like Michael Jordan in the Philippines. And then she said the word that matters more than any other word in this entire analysis. She said Eala needs to be protected like a big star. When a Hall of Fame player uses the word protected in a commercial context, she is not talking about security details. She is talking about the kind of contract architecture, the kind of agent representation, the kind of brand partnership that holds an athlete steady when the cultural footprint outpaces the ranking. Clijsters has lived inside that gap. She knows what it costs when the structure is not there. So that is the tension this video is about. Conventional tennis economics says one thing. The market, the actual screaming, traveling, ticket-buying, jersey-wearing market, says something else entirely. And Nike, more than any brand on earth, makes its money by reading that gap correctly before everyone else does. Now, let's bring in the comparables, because this is where speculation stops being speculation and starts being arithmetic. Begin with Naomi Osaka. In 2019, fresh off her US Open and Australian Open titles, Osaka signed a Nike deal reported across multiple outlets at roughly $10 million per year. By the time her commercial peak hit in 2020 and 2021, her total annual earnings, endorsements stacked on prize money, crossed $50 million, and Nike was the spine of that structure. The Osaka deal became the template. A young player, a cultural bridge between two countries, a market Nike wanted to own. Sound familiar? Move to Coco Gauff. Nike signed her as a teenager before she had won a slam, in a multi-year extension that industry estimates have placed in the $8 to $12 million per year range once her commercial value matured. The Gauff deal was not paying for what she had already won. It was paying for the cultural slot Nike believed she was about to occupy. That is what Nike does. They do not pay for the past. They pay for the room the athlete is walking into. Then there is Emma Raducanu. And Raducanu is the most important comparable in this entire video. So slow down with me here. Raducanu won the 2021 US Open as a qualifier, an unranked teenager, and within 12 months she had signed endorsement deals with Nike, Tiffany, Dior, Porsche, British Airways, Vodafone, and Evian. Her total commercial portfolio was estimated by Forbes and others in the range of $15 to $20 million per year, without a second slam, without a sustained top 10 ranking, with her actual on-court results declining. The market paid her for cultural fit and cross-market appeal, not for tennis dominance. Now sit with that for a moment. Raducanu, at the peak of her commercial valuation, was a player who had won one slam and then struggled to stay healthy. Her ranking dropped, her results wobbled, and the brands kept paying because the cultural slot she occupied, young, multi-ethnic, British, cross-market, was worth the spend even when the tennis was not. Eala occupies a structurally identical slot. 21 years old. The first Filipino, male or female, to break into the WTA Top 100. A country of 110 million people that has never had a tennis figure of this magnitude in its history. A diaspora of roughly 10 million more spread across the United States, the Gulf, Europe, and East Asia. A region, Southeast Asia, that every major sportswear brand on the planet is currently trying to crack, with combined market potential that Bain & Company has estimated in the hundreds of billions across the next decade. The Filipino market alone is not the prize. The prize is the regional unlock. Eala is the first credible tennis figure capable of converting Southeast Asia, Indonesia, Vietnam, Thailand, Malaysia, the Philippines, into a tennis-watching, tennis-buying audience at scale. There has never been an athlete in this slot. Not once. Not ever. Which means the comparable that matters is not the standard ranked top 30. No slam comparable. The comparable that matters is the market-opening comparable. And market-opening athletes get paid like market-opening athletes. So what does the math actually suggest? Let's build it carefully. A baseline Nike deal for a top 40 WTA player with no slam title, no special cultural angle, no major market, based on publicly reported figures from across the last decade, sits somewhere in the $500,000 to $1.5 million per year range. That is the floor. That is what a player gets paid for being on tour, wearing the swoosh, showing up for 2 photo shoots a year. Add the Filipino market premium. Exclusive access to a population of 110 million, plus a globally dispersed diaspora that has demonstrated repeatedly willingness to travel internationally just to watch her play. And that number multiplies. Conservative brand strategists I have read on this kind of valuation place the regional market premium at 2 times to 4 times the base. Add the Southeast Asia regional unlock. The fact that Eala is not just opening one country, but credibly opening a region of 700 million people that no tennis player has ever opened, and a serious case can be made for another multiplier on top. Add the cultural icon premium that Kleisters was pointing at when she said Michael Jordan, the fact that Eala is not just a player but a generational symbol, the kind of figure that anchors decade-long brand campaigns. And you are now in territory where the comparables stop being mid-tier WTA deals and start being Raducanu-tier commercial deals. Stack all of that together honestly against the public reporting on Osaka, Gauff, and Raducanu, and the range that emerges for a fully built-out Eala-Nike partnership: apparel, footwear, regional marketing rights, signature product line eventually, sits somewhere in the $5 to $15 million per year range across the life of a multi-year deal. The lower end if Nike structures it conservatively with performance escalators. The higher end if they decide to plant a flag and own this market before Adidas, Puma, or On can move. That is the whisper. That is the range industry people are quietly modeling when they look at the Sabalenka hair tie and the Vogue cover and the Beaverton visit and ask themselves what those gestures are actually building toward. Nobody has confirmed a number. Nike has not announced anything. And the actual figure, when it lands, will be whatever it is. But the comparables are the comparables. And the comparable suggests the floor is higher than most casual fans would guess, and the ceiling is high enough to reshape Philippine sports economics by itself. Now, and this is the part most analysis videos skip, none of those numbers happen unless the tennis keeps showing up. The commercial machine is not building itself around a hair tie. It is building itself around what happened on a grass court in Birmingham this week. 3 matches into the Birmingham draw, Eala had dropped 0 sets. Priscilla Hahn dispatched 6-0, 6-2. Alina Charayeva, who pushed her to 2-5 down in the second set, finished off 6-2, 7-5. Mananchaya Sawankaya beaten 6-3, 6-2 in the quarterfinal. 3 matches, 0 sets dropped. On grass, a surface Eala had barely played on at the professional level before this tournament. That is what brand executives mean when they say they want to see how an athlete wins. Anyone can win a final. The athletes Nike pays empire money to are the ones who absorb a 2-5 deficit on a surface they don't know yet, against an opponent they don't fear yet, and produce 5 straight games of focused tennis. That is not talent. That is the trained composure of someone who has been preparing for the size of her own future longer than most of her competitors have known her name. 11 days before Birmingham, Eala lost in the first round of Roland Garros to Iva Jovic, an American she has called a close friend, 4-6, 2-6. Her second consecutive first-round slam exit of the year. There was no long press conference, no reflective social media post. She showed up in Birmingham 6 days later and bageled the first set of her opening match in 22 minutes. That is the asset Nike is actually buying. Not a ranking. Not a slam result, a temperament, a composure, a response pattern under pressure that scales. And that is exactly the trait that brand investments compound around over a 10-year horizon. So why the whispers? Why isn't this announced yet? Because Nike does not announce mid-tournament. Nike announces at moments of maximum cultural amplification. Wimbledon is 2 weeks away. The Bad Homburg grass event sits in between, with reports, unconfirmed but circulating, that Eala may partner with Venus Williams in doubles, which would be a global news cycle by itself. The US Open looms in late August. Any one of those windows is a stage Nike could choose. The pattern of Nike's behavior over the past 12 months, the Sampaguita hair tie at Wimbledon 2025, the Vogue Philippines cover in August, the Beaverton visit in February 2026 with the Filipino language caption is the pattern of a brand pacing toward a moment. Each gesture larger than the last, each one geographically expanding her commercial footprint. The trajectory is not subtle, it is just unannounced. When the announcement lands, and the trajectory says it will land within the next 12 months, possibly the next 6, the number itself will be the headline. The countries it covers will be the subtext. And the players who were on tour the year Alex Eala signed her first major Nike deal will remember exactly where they were standing when it broke. Here is what the whispering is really about, underneath all the contract math. The tennis world has spent the last 40 years watching commercial empires get built around players from the United States, from Russia, from Western Europe, from Japan, from China. The map of where tennis money goes has been the map of where tennis money has always gone. And for decades, an entire region of the world, a region with 700 million people, with rising middle classes, with one of the most digitally engaged sports audiences on the planet, has been waiting at the edge of that map for a figure capable of pulling the cartography toward it. Alex Eala is that figure. Not because she has finished the work, she has not. She is 21. She is still building. The slam title is somewhere ahead of her, not behind her. But the market does not wait for the trophy. The market moves when it sees the architecture of inevitability, and the architecture is now visible to anyone paying attention. The hair tie was the first signal. The Vogue cover was the second. The Beaverton visit was the third. The Birmingham run, 3 matches, 0 sets dropped on a surface she barely knew, was the fourth. The room Nike is preparing to put her in is the room reserved for athletes whose names eventually become the shorthand for an entire region's relationship to a sport. Yao Ming did that for basketball in China. Hidilyn Diaz cracked open that conversation for the Philippines in weightlifting. The slot for tennis has been empty. It is not empty anymore. When the number lands, 5 million, 10 million, 15, it will not be the most important fact about this story. The most important fact will be the room she is now standing in. The room where brand strategy meetings open with her name. The room where regional marketing budgets get drawn around her face. The room where a Sampaguita hair tie, sitting in a storage facility in Oregon, gets remembered as the smallest object that ever signaled the largest shift. She is in that room now. The contract will just be the paperwork that catches up.